From years of anxiety to warrior and mentor, Bradley Robinson created the Anxiety Project to help you end your anxiety naturally. Let's mold the new you and let's end anxiety together.
Welcome, friends. Welcome to the Anxiety Project podcast. Welcome to 294. Today, I want to connect with you guys on my abstinence from pornography. It's been 5.5 years that I've been clean, and a lot of men on my channel in particular come and talk to me about this. They want to sign up for coaching because they're struggling with pornography addiction. And I noticed online the nofap trend is so incredibly prominent on the YouTube front because there's this overwhelming awakening happening to men and pornography. Pornography is a commodity. It's been capitalized on from the advent of the internet, right? It's a male instinct to propagate and to progress his genes forward, and that wouldn't be the case if we weren't attracted to the opposite sex. It just wouldn't be the case. So we're attracted, the majority of us, to the opposite sex, and then the internet rolls around, and then I could go on the internet and watch and look at other women naked, engaging in sexual acts. And then I'm like, well, that's interesting. Why am I feeling very pleased by watching this? I am not the one engaging in it, but yet here I am watching someone else engage in it and feeling very aroused. What is happening here? And so many men now struggle. I struggled with it for a decade, and it didn't turn into a struggle. It became my normal. Then the struggle really came when I decided to separate myself from the act. And that's the thing. I realized that abstinence is awareness of how toxic and gripping a habit can be, thus making you more wise than the one who remains a slave to the habit. To abstain is the real struggle. That's the real struggle. I get comments on my videos all the time about nofap, how, oh, it's just easy for you. People make excuses. Men make excuses. In particular, men make excuses on like the reasons why it's so easy for me to abstain, but it's a real challenge. And that's why I really wanted to make this podcast episode today, is because the real challenge is saying no. I've noticed even 5.5 years into my recovery, I can see that it will creep up, that it's the dragon, the drive to watch pornography is there. It's always there every single day. It's not like it goes away and you're completely free. The freedom is the struggle. The freedom, really, it's the struggle. It's awareness. That's the key. And it's the stacked wins over time. Because I've said no to this desire and this drive so many times that I can fall back on that, all those wins. It's like Goggins in the cookie jar. When you hit a wall and you're struggling and the brain wants to quit, you reach into that cookie jar and you pull out all of those wins that you've accomplished, all those times where it was difficult, but you persevered and you kept going and you made it out on the other side stronger and more confident. That's where I can pull out those wins. And then I can easily turn to my more confident side of my personality where I can say, well, look, there's just no way. Even though I'm feeling this urge, there's just no way. I've stacked too many wins. I've created this new identity. It's not worth losing so much of that and confronting that shame and guilt just for a few minutes of pleasure. It's not worth it. I noticed that life, it will do whatever it can do to pull me back into my old ways. In Because like when I go out in public, women are walking around in the most provocative outfits, billboards, half naked women, magazines, half naked women, things on the internet, half ads on the internet, half naked women, pornographic scenes and movies and television shows. I just feel that life, it will do whatever it can. It will do whatever it can. And I've noticed when I first separated myself from pornography and I was really going a day or 2 days without it, my sexual instincts were heightened, where I was more sensitive to sexual cues around me, like the women walking down the street or the things I was seeing on TV, or just the time of day where I would usually watch, and that would be an urge like that. That's how ingrained the a habit can be, is you do it at a particular time of day, and so when that time comes you get the thought, and that leads to the action, right? This drive, this need, this craving. And if you remain in unconsciousness, and if you're not aware, that's what unconsciousness is you're just a slave to all of these internal deities happening within you. If you remain unconscious, then you remain a puppet to God knows what. To God knows what. And those things are then control you rather than you controlling them. I realized many things over my almost 6 years of recovery from pornography. One is, like I mentioned before, you think you've mastered it, but then life will cut you from your weakest point. It'll cut you down at your weakest point. So, I am a father now. Maggie, all through her pregnancy, she was not doing well and she had a lot of nausea and her sex drive was non existent. And we haven't been intimate in almost a year. And so I've noticed over the past year that the struggle actually got more challenging because, yeah, we were intimate over my many years of nofap. And that helped. It helps being intimate with somebody. It makes the journey much easier. But what happens when you have no sex and you have no pornography and you don't masturbate? None of that. Then what? Well, I found out that I needed to release much of this energy in other ways. But it's not just other ways. I needed to connect more with the people around me because it was this craving. I noticed that I needed affection. I need intimacy. I needed connection. I needed connection with other people. And I think that's just part of one of the human needs, right? We need connection. We need to talk to people. We need to hug people. And I needed to increase all of that because I wasn't being intimate sexually with Maggie. And it's not just that. I needed to increase my exercise regimen. I needed to meditate. I found out that just because I feel a certain way, it doesn't mean I have to act on it. Just because I'm just getting this urge and I'm pull, well, I had to ask myself, like, why is it worth engaging in pornography? Oh, why not? Why not? You could just release it. It'll be 5 minutes and then you'll feel better. But I've noticed Since I started to watch pornography, that is never the case. I always feel guilty, shame, I regret that decision. And that's why I don't do it, is because I always visualize the consequence when I get that urge. I've practiced that. I've practiced visualizing what it would be like if I were to do it. I would disappoint you guys on YouTube. I would disappoint my wife. I would disappoint my family. And furthermore, I would just disappoint myself, feeling like I had no control over this thing. And I realized that I can drift into my old habits again. And in Christianity, it is encouraged to practice daily prayer in order to grow closer to God. We can drift. That's the point here, is if we don't practice something that is in keeping with the spirit, our higher aims, God, then we will drift off the path. Like when you're steering a car and you look to the right, your natural instinct, or you'll just naturally drift the car to the right. It'll slowly drift. Watch
My anxiety recovery
for the
program
path
is
that
available
leads
over
to
at
despair every
unpluggedanxiety.com.
single day.
Included is the
And
releasing trauma exercise.
the right
This
outlook
is where
is
you walk through and
I'm going
release
to remain
past trauma
sober
using an NLP
for one
based
more
audio
day. I learned that
recording
from Ed
by
Milet.
myself. That's
One
at
more day sober, one more day
unpluggedanxiety.com.
today.
Go there to learn
Today.
more.
Focus on what you have to do. What are your intentions? I've met with many clients, and I've noticed the clients that relapse, and talking with them, they would say how they stopped meditating, they stopped prayer, they stopped listening to their role models, and all of these things that were supporting this new identity that they were developing. They stopped it, and it's quite evident why they fell back into their bad habits. When you're half in and when you're half out, that's not a great place to be, half in and half out, because it was Christ that says, if you're neither hot nor cold but lukewarm, I will spit you out of my mouth. Choose a side. If you're going to go all into the dark side, you go all in. If you're going to go all into the goodness and to for your and serve your higher self, you go all in. But it's being in this medium. That's not a good place to be, because if you're in a medium, you'll inevitably fall into the dark side. And why? It's because you don't have enough justification to pursue your higher aims, and your desires will always lean into the path of least resistance. That's how it'll work. The brain always wants to be comfortable. It wants comfort. It loves comfort. So imagine you're half in and you're half out, and then you have a day where you're feeling frustrated. Your boss says something to you that makes you angry, or you didn't get enough sleep and you're grouchy. And where do you think you're going to turn when you're not praying, or when you're not going to the gym, or when you're not taking care of yourself, or setting yourself up for success? What happens is you'll tilt into that path that leads to despair. Now, look, I hated who I was as a person. I hated who I was. I thought at the beginning of my recovery, you know what? What if I just did the opposite of what I'm doing now? I don't like where I'm at in my life. I think everything is in ruin. I I don't I don't I think I'm stupid. Really, I'm uneducated. I'm scared of the world. I have to start doing things that are not in alignment to who I am now. I just don't like who I am. And so when you live such a hedonistic lifestyle, you reach a plateau of this isn't what it used to be. This isn't what it used to be. So the drugs, the things that you're clinging on that is helping you, it's exciting, it's connecting you with other people, possibly it's making you feel good. It's you kind of forget the world, you're relaxing after a stressful day. But the thing about this hedonistic lifestyle is it keeps you unconscious. It keeps you it keeps you in this dependent state. And it'll catch up to you because because you're relying on this on a regular basis, your tolerance to this, well, increases. And then what happens, you're going to have to incorporate more and more. Uh, what I learned from pornography is that you will notice that if you watch pornography long enough, you will begin to watch it for longer periods and explore new videos continuously. That was me because I was always on the edge of what's new and exciting, what's different, what's different. And being on that edge of novelty is what's driving the dopaminergic system because it's the anticipation neurochemical. It's when am I going to get it? And I can't wait until I get it. It's going to be around the corner. This is so exciting. So imagine that you have these expectations of, when you're going to get the drug at a specific time and you're going to feel a certain way once you get the drug of choice, but the pleasure after receiving it isn't as what it used to be, and then you're going to get a series of disappointments. Your happiness and your well-being is dependent upon the quality of the things you are incorporating into your life. That's not a great way to live because you're just going to live a life of despair. These things lead down roads that have dead ends. They have dead ends. They have no long-term use for you because they're going to cause problems. All habits that are deemed toxic, and that's your own definition. I'm not going to tell you which habits are toxic. You have to decipher that for yourself. But I know from my experience that if I'm putting something on a pedestal and I'm constantly putting something at the forefront of my day to day as something, hey, I'm looking forward to this. If I have this feeling of like, oh, I'm excited about this. Oh, I can't wait to dive into that. Or I get this feeling of excitement when I'm going online. I have to pay attention to what is it that's exciting here? What am I putting up on my values hierarchy here? American psychiatrist Dr. Anna Lemke describes it so beautifully. She says the dopaminergic system is tilted to pleasure. And when it's tilted to pleasure for too long and to high degrees, the more susceptible we are to pain. We become more sensitive to pain. We can't really handle pain. That's huge, right? That's huge. That's one of the biggest drives for me in why I remain sober, okay? And abstinent from pornography. It's this, if I can't handle the temptation of this, then I can't how am I going to handle everything else in my life? We become dependent on something to remain in that dopamine phase, that domain of pleasure. You treat that habit as a deity. Be careful. Be careful because if you're putting pornography up on what's high, what's valuable to you, or sleeping around, or some drug of choice, alcohol, you're worshiping that thing. We're always worshiping something, always. As James Clear puts it, every action you take is an internal vote of the person you want to become. Every action. Then I heard this great quote from somewhere that goes like this: how you do something is how you do everything. But here's the good news. It takes 1 month to rise above the habit, to go through the withdrawal symptoms. But the bad news is you have to suffer through the withdrawal symptoms. And so my experience was, with pornography in particular, was restlessness, irritability, heightened awareness to sexual cues, just frustration, lots of frustration. It's a death and rebirth from dependent user to independent person who's confident, who doesn't need to rely on something external. You must leave the tyranny of the state and wander the desert. And here's the thing, it gets worse before it gets better. Because as the Israelites left the tyranny of Egypt to follow Moses to the promised land, before you hit the promised land, they're wandering the desert for 40 years. They're questioning everything. They're questioning their decision. They're yearning for Egypt because at least they had structure, even though it was a tyranny. You always know that if you leave a job for another job, sometimes you wonder whether it was the right decision. Sometimes you wonder what if it was the right decision to move somewhere else. It gets worse, but that's the thing about novelty is when you go into the desert, a place where you don't know. You just don't know what's going to happen. It's a place that's not familiar to you. You have to establish new order within the unknown. And that's difficult. That's why it gets worse before it gets better. But here's the thing about the promised land is it'll get better. It's a leap of faith, but it'll get better. And then the question is, how did I remain absent of pornography? Well, I wanted to be the opposite of Cain. And I wanted to surround myself with people doing better than me. I wanted better things. When I would come across someone on the internet who's going 100, 200 days nofap, I'm like, man, this person has something to teach me. Like, what did you do? Ask questions. Cain hated these people. He hated people who were doing better than him. And he killed his ideal, and he suffered greatly for that. That's what happens. And then you have to have a vision of who you want to be. You have to have a vision. What could you look like? What could you feel like in a year from now without pornography? How will others see you? What if in a year from now you continue the habit and you don't get out of it? What does that look like? Have your anxiety chase you forward into who you want to be. You have to write this down. Write these questions down, sit with them, and create a vision. Sit and meditate on what this person looks like. You have to do this, and it has to be a daily thing if you want any change to occur. People just don't want to do this. People keep asking questions of like, what's the hack? What's the secret? There's no hack. You just have to want it. You have to have a vision. You have to have a goal, a short-term goal. In the next hour, are you going to watch pornography? Like, you have to even pick and write out the times of your day that you are more tempted to watch pornography. It's a certain time of day, great. Write that down, and then write down what you are going to do instead during that time frame. Real change occurs when you are in the eye of the storm. when you're in the eye of the storm of temptation and you decide to say no, that's when change happens. You commit. You don't do it. You have a plan. You go to the gym instead. You go to the coffee shop instead. You go for a walk instead. And then you see a complete new side of yourself as a consequence. It just takes one time to really see something, to really shift something in your mind. It just takes that one time. People wake up and say, oh, I'll never do it. There's self-fulfilling prophecies. I'll never do it. But it's now. It's really now. If you decide to say, hey, I'm going to do this instead, see what happens. It's a leap of faith into the desert. Today, do it today. There's no better time. It's not going to happen in the future. Trust me, I've waited around for change to happen. Nothing comes. Nothing comes. No change will come. There's nothing going to help you if you are half in and half out. Not even that. You're just out. People don't even realize, but they're out. Goggins says people only use 40% of their capacity. There's a governor on the car. I love his way. I love this metaphor. There's a governor on the car, and the manufacturers put that there because they don't want you going past a certain speed. So when you're on the highway, the car can't get past, say, like 140. But when you take the governor off, the car can go a lot faster than that. It can go a lot faster. It has so much more potential. So we have a governor on our brains. We don't realize what we're capable of until we get to the 140 mark, and then we go 141. As soon as you go 141, then you see a difference. Like, there's something beyond the veil here. There's something beyond the veil. What is your drug of choice? What is your drug of choice, and what is it providing you that you feel is lacking in your life? For me, it was real connection, affection, attention that I was lacking. And pornography was a great substitute for that. It was something I can escape. I wanted to escape. I wanted to have an experience, right? I was an experience seeker, and I'm getting that experience from other things, from books, books, spirituality, Christianity. I'm getting that from those things. And from responsibility in my life, the new experiences of now being a father, doing new things continuously day to day. It's just, I feel like I was grabbing onto other things. At least these things, the novelty that I'm grabbing on now is actually building my character. Pornography was not. That's another thing. Is the habit that you're engaging in building your character or keeping you stuck? Huge. That's huge. Being promiscuous, I was seeking novelty. I was seeking new things, the chase, the sexual experience, the attention, the affection. And this all is gift wrapped in this act of pursuit, right? This pursuit of novelty, really. But I never arrived. In fact, as soon as the chase was over, I thought, well, what's the next thing? When I worshiped external means, I was worn out. I neglected myself. I was tired. I was anxious. I was depressed. A garden that is neglected will grow tall with weeds and bugs. Lastly, pornography is divorced from reality. It's not real. It's like how Tinkerbell is real to Peter Pan. Well, she's not real. She's fluttering around his head. He can bend her to his will. I mean, is that really a man that that image, that manifestation is the highlight of his life, or the center of his life, I think it's pathetic. I think it's absolutely, there's no excuse for it. I think that a real woman is independent. She thinks for herself. She calls a man out on his stupidity. She has her flaws. Like, she's, going to have the bad morning breath, and she's going to, she's going to struggle in her own way, and it's not going to be some fanciful paradise vision of woman, right? It's going to be real. It's going to include difficulty. It's going to include sickness. And you both have your arguments. You're both wrestling towards something, because, like Dr. Peterson says, if you live with a woman and you're not married, there's something like, well, if things get too bad, then there's a doorway out of here. People don't want to make real commitments. Like having a child, for me, being a father now, I realize now that the child's here, I'm holding him in my arms, I realize that there's no getting out of this. Like, there's something so great about that. Like, this is your responsibility. This is your responsibility. You have to take on this. This is real. People don't want to make that leap. It's so pathetic. It's so, so pathetic that people want to just, they're so sensitive to real challenge and difficulty. But that's where you grow. That's where I'm growing. That's where you're growing. It's in the challenge. It's in the commitments. It's in the responsibility. And boys that decide to take on the challenge of life become men. Responsibility, trust, integrity, perseverance. Living with intention rather than at the whims of internal drives is what's meaningful. That's what it means to remain in unconsciousness, driven by desires rather than truth. And that's where I'm going to leave you on this podcast episode. Thank you, everyone, for being here with me today. I'm so grateful. Make sure you listen to the previous episode, number 293. I talk about something very similar to what I'm talking about today. I was talking about, I can't even remember, the sacrifice, the significance of sacrifice, sacrifice of immediate gratification to something worthwhile in your life. So go check that out now. Go. And lastly, rise above anxiety. I'll see you next time. My anxiety recovery program is available over at unpluganxiety.com. Included is the Releasing Trauma exercise. This is where you can walk through and release past trauma using an NLP-based audio recording by myself. That's at unpluganxiety.com. Go there to learn more.